The great hall of the Valorian palace stretched higher than any building on Earth. Crystal columns rose toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the clouds themselves. Princess Zyra Velamara stood at the center of it all, her skin shifting between pale blue and silver as hundreds of guests watched her wedding ceremony. She did not want to be here. The human standing beside her was shorter than any Valorian in the room. Lieutenant Ryan Parker wore his Earth military uniform, dark blue with simple medals on his chest. He stood straight and quiet, his brown eyes looking ahead at the Empress who performed the ceremony. Zyra noticed his hands were steady. At least he was not trembling like some primitive creature. That was something. The Empress spoke the ancient words in the Valorian language. Zyra responded when required. Ryan had learned his parts phonetically, stumbling only once over the complex sounds. The guests whispered among themselves. Zyra's skin flushed darker blue with embarrassment. This marriage was not about love. It was politics. Earth had resources the Valorian Empire wanted. The Valorians had technology and star charts that humanity needed. A wedding between their peoples would seal the alliance. Zyra understood her duty. She was the third daughter. Not important enough to inherit the throne, but valuable enough to trade for peace. Still, it felt wrong. The legends said humans were dangerous, violent, short-lived, and unable to control their emotions. They came from a death world where everything tried to kill them, and they had become savage because of it. The ancient texts described them as barely civilized, prone to fighting, and incapable of understanding complex ideas. Looking at Ryan now, Zyra tried to see the monster from the stories. He looked ordinary. Average height for a human, which made him quite short compared to Valorians. Dark hair cut in a military style. A face that seemed kind, though Zyra reminded herself that appearances meant nothing. Humans were predators. Their eyes faced forward like hunters. They had teeth designed for tearing meat. The ceremony ended. The guests applauded. Zyra and Ryan were now husband and wife. The reception that followed was magnificent. Tables overflowed with food from a dozen worlds. Musicians played instruments that created sounds beyond human hearing. Though Ryan seemed to enjoy the parts he could hear, diplomats and nobles approached the couple, offering congratulations that sounded hollow to Zyra's ears. A Valorian duke named Telvon approached Ryan with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Lieutenant Parker, I hope you will be comfortable in our world," Telvon said in perfect English. "Though I imagine everything here must seem quite advanced compared to Earth," Ryan smiled politely. "Your technology is impressive. Yes, very different from what we have." "Different," Telvon repeated, his skin flashing orange with amusement. "Such a diplomatic word. We have been traveling the stars for 3,000 years. Your species just learned to leave your own solar system." "That's true," Ryan agreed. His voice stayed calm and even. "We're still learning," Telvon laughed and walked away. Zyra noticed Ryan's jaw tighten slightly, but he said nothing. Perhaps the human had some self-control after all. The evening continued. Zyra performed her duties as the new bride, speaking with important guests and accepting their well wishes. Ryan stayed close, but quiet, speaking only when spoken to. He did not seem angry or upset by the obvious condescension from the Valorian nobles. Zyra found this surprising. The legends said humans could not tolerate insults without becoming violent. Near the end of the reception, the Empress herself approached them. Zyra's mother was tall, even for a Valorian. Her crystalline skin, a deep purple that showed her age and wisdom. "Lieutenant Parker," the Empress said, "I trust you will find the royal wing suitable for your needs. We have prepared chambers for you next to Zyra's quarters. Every comfort has been provided." Ryan bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty is very generous. However, I would prefer simpler quarters. Perhaps in the diplomatic section of the palace." The Empress's skin flickered with confusion. "The diplomatic section? Those rooms are meant for visiting ambassadors, not family." "I understand, Your Majesty, but I have not yet earned the right to live in the royal wing. I am a lieutenant in Earth's military. I would feel more comfortable in quarters appropriate to my rank." Silence spread through the nearby guests. Zyra felt her skin turn bright red with anger. Was this human refusing a gift from the Empress? Did he not understand how insulting that was? The Empress studied Ryan for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "Very well, Lieutenant. I will have rooms prepared in the diplomatic wing, though the offer of the royal chambers remains open. Should you change your mind?" Ryan bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty." After the Empress left, Zyra grabbed Ryan's arm and pulled him to a quiet corner. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "My mother offered you a great honor, and you refused it." Ryan looked at her calmly. "I did not refuse anything, Princess. I simply asked for something different. You asked to live away from me. Do you find me so unpleasant?" "I asked to live in quarters that match what I have earned," Ryan said. "I am a stranger here. Your people barely tolerate me. If I move into the royal wing now, I will be seen as someone taking advantage of this marriage. I would rather earn respect than demand it." Zyra stared at him. This was the primitive pride the legends spoke of. Humans could not accept gifts because they saw everything as a challenge to their dominance. "You understand nothing about our culture," she said coldly. "You're right," Ryan agreed. "I don't. But I understand something about dignity. On my world, we have a saying. Respect is earned, not given." He walked away before Zyra could respond, leaving her standing alone in the corner of her own wedding reception. Later that night, Zyra retired to her chambers in the royal wing. Her attendants helped her remove the ceremonial robes and jewelry. She dismissed them and stood on her private balcony, looking out over the capital city. Lights stretched to the horizon. A city of 10 million people built over thousands of years. Somewhere in the diplomatic wing, her new husband was settling into much simpler rooms. Zyra thought about what he had said. About earning respect instead of taking it. On Valoria, respect came from birth and position. The royal family commanded respect because of who they were, not what they did. Humans thought differently. That much was clear. Zyra looked up at the night sky. Somewhere among those stars was Earth, the death world that had produced this strange man she had married. The legends said humans were dangerous because they were violent and savage, but standing on her balcony, Zyra wondered if perhaps humans were dangerous for a different reason. They did not think like other species. They did not accept the way things had always been done. She went to bed that night with questions in her mind. Questions about the legends she had been taught her entire life. Questions about whether those legends told the complete truth. And questions about Ryan Parker, the human who had chosen dignity over luxury on his wedding night. The marriage had begun. Now, Zyra would learn if the legends were right about humans, or if, perhaps, the legends had left out important details that made all the difference. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding. Zyra and Ryan lived separate lives that intersected only when required. They shared diplomatic dinners twice a week, sitting across from each other and making polite conversation about nothing important. Ryan asked questions about Valorian culture. Zyra gave short answers. Neither of them pretended this was a real marriage. Zyra spent her days in meetings with trade negotiators and cultural advisors. Ryan spent his time reading about Valorian technology and taking long walks through the palace gardens. They were strangers, sharing the same political arrangement. Then everything changed on a Tuesday morning. Zyra was in a meeting with her economic council when the alarms started, a high-pitched wailing sound that meant emergency. Her advisor's skin turned white with fear. "What is happening?" Zyra demanded. A guard rushed into the room. "Princess, there has been a solar flare. The radiation pulse damaged several power grids across the city. The palace tertiary grid is failing." "The tertiary grid?" Zyra felt her own skin pale. "That controls life support for the lower levels." "Yes, Princess." "The servant quarters. We have approximately 4 hours of backup power before life support fails completely." Zyra stood immediately. "Evacuate everyone to other sections of the palace." "That may not be possible," the guard said carefully. "There are over 300 workers in those sections. Moving them through the palace would require them to pass through the royal areas. Protocol forbids it." "Protocol? Always protocol. The servant class did not enter royal sections except through specific service corridors, and those corridors did not have the capacity to move 300 people in 4 hours. Then bring in engineering teams, Zyra ordered. Fix the grid. Teams are already on site, Princess. They estimate repairs will take 6 hours minimum. 6 hours. They had 4. Zyra rushed to the damage section with her guards. The engineering bay looked like organized chaos. Valorian technicians worked on large panels, covered in complex symbols and readouts. The head engineer, a woman named Sereth, looked exhausted. "What is the situation?" Zyra asked. Sereth's skin flickered orange with frustration. The solar flare overloaded the tertiary grid's primary junction. "We need to replace the entire junction assembly. But it is fused to the backup systems. If we force it, we might damage the backups too. Then there would be no power at all. Can you repair it faster than 6 hours?" "Not without risking total failure, Princess. I am sorry." Zyra felt helpless. 300 people would die because of protocol and technology that could not be fixed quickly enough. She was about to order the evacuation anyway. Protocol be damned. When a voice spoke behind her. "May I see the damage?" Ryan stood in the doorway. He was wearing simple work clothes instead of his uniform and carrying a tool bag. Sereth looked at him with barely concealed disgust. "This is Valorian technology, human. Far beyond your understanding." "Maybe," Ryan said, "but I would still like to look." "We do not have time for this," Sereth said, turning back to her work. Zyra almost agreed. But then she remembered Ryan's face at the wedding reception. Calm. Steady. Not reacting to insults. "Let him look," she said. Sereth's skin flashed red with anger, but she stepped aside. Ryan approached the damaged junction and studied it carefully. He asked questions in basic terms. Where does the power come from? Where does it need to go? What happens if this component fails? The Valorian engineers answered with barely hidden contempt, but they answered. Ryan nodded and looked at the junction from different angles. He opened his tool bag and pulled out what looked like a simple scanner. "This junction is definitely fused," he said. "But the backup systems are independent, right? They just share the same physical housing?" "Yes," Sereth said impatiently. "But if we try to separate them, we will damage the backups." "What if we do not separate them?" Ryan asked. "Then we cannot replace the primary junction." "What if we do not replace it?" Ryan pulled out a small device from his bag. "What if we bypass it completely?" Ryan pulled out of we. Sereth stared at him. "Bypass the primary junction? That violates every safety protocol. The system is designed with redundancy to prevent exactly that kind of shortcut." "I understand," Ryan said. "But right now, we do not need a perfect system. We just need power to keep running for 6 hours until you can do proper repairs. A temporary bypass would work." "It would be dangerous," Sereth insisted. "The power flow would be unregulated. There could be surges." "Can the backup systems handle surges?" "For a limited time, yes. But then that is what we do." Ryan was already unpacking more tools. "I will need help. The bypass needs to connect here, here, and here." He pointed at 3 different access panels. Sereth looked at Zyra. "Princess, I cannot authorize this. It goes against all engineering principles." Zyra looked at the chronometer. 3 hours and 45 minutes of backup power remaining. She thought about 300 people dying because engineers refused to break protocols. "Do what Lieutenant Parker suggests," she ordered. Sereth's skin went nearly white with shock, but she nodded. "Yes, Princess." What followed was the strangest hour of Zyra's life. Ryan worked with the speed and confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before. He directed Valorian engineers to access panels and reroute connections. When they protested that his methods were crude or unsafe, he calmly explained why those methods would work anyway. He used human tools that looked primitive compared to Valorian equipment. He bypassed safety systems that Valorians considered essential. He created a power flow that made the engineers gasp with horror at how unregulated it was. And it worked. 90 minutes after Ryan started, Power flowed to the servant quarters. The backup systems hummed with the strain but held. Life support was restored. The engineers stood in stunned silence. Sareth ran diagnostics 3 times, clearly not believing what her instruments told her. "The bypass is holding," she said quietly. "Power is stable. This should not work, but it does." Ryan packed his tools. "It will hold for 6 hours easily. Maybe 8. That gives you time to do proper repairs." 1. And 1. Sarath looked at him with an expression Zyra could not read. Finally, the engineer said, "Your solution was inelegant and violated numerous safety standards, but it was effective. I must acknowledge that." Ryan smiled. "On Earth, we have a saying. If it looks stupid, but it works, it is not stupid." He left the engineering bay before anyone could respond. Zyra followed him, catching up in one of the palace corridors. "Wait," she called. Ryan stopped and turned. "Princess? How did you know how to do that? Valorian technology is supposed to be far beyond human understanding." Ryan shrugged. "Technology is technology. The principles are the same everywhere. You need power to go from point A to point B. If the normal path is blocked, you find another path. But the safety protocols are important," Ryan agreed. "When you have time for them. But when people are dying, sometimes you need to take risks." Zyra thought about the legends. They said humans were too primitive for advanced technology. Yet Ryan had just solved a problem that Valorian engineers with centuries of training could not solve. "Where did you learn to work like that?" she asked. For the first time since the wedding, Ryan's expression softened. "I grew up on a colony world called New Manitoba. It was one of the first human settlements outside the solar system. Everything was new, and nothing worked right. We had equipment breaking down constantly. No replacement parts. No engineers coming to help. We fixed things ourselves or we died." "That sounds difficult." "It was," Ryan said. "I was 8 years old the first time I had to bypass a water filtration system because the main pump failed. My father showed me how. He said that fancy solutions are great when you have resources, but sometimes you just need something that works right now, even if it is not perfect." Zyra realized she knew almost nothing about this man she had married. She knew he was a military officer. She knew he had come to Valoria for the wedding, but she did not know where he had come from or what his life had been like. "Will you tell me more?" she asked. "About your colony? About Earth?" Ryan looked surprised. "You want to know about Earth?" "I want to understand," Zyra said carefully. "The legends say humans are primitive. But you just did something my people's best engineers could not do. Either the legends are wrong, or they are incomplete." Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "All right. There is a garden on the east side of the palace. I walk there sometimes. Would you join me tomorrow?" "Yes," Zyra said. "I would like that." That evening, Zyra sat in her chambers thinking about what had happened. The legends said humans were violent and savage because they came from a harsh world. But maybe that harsh world had taught them things that species from easier planets had never learned. Valorians had technology and resources and time. They could afford perfect solutions and strict protocols. Humans had none of those advantages. They learned to improvise, to take risks, to find solutions that worked, even if they were not elegant. Zyra's skin shifted to pale green, the color of curiosity. She had lived her entire life believing the legends. Now, for the first time, she wondered what else those legends had gotten wrong about humanity. In the servant quarters below, 300 workers continued their jobs, unaware how close they had come to disaster. Unaware that a human had saved them using methods that violated every rule Valorian engineers followed. And in his simple quarters in the diplomatic wing, Ryan Parker sat by his window, looking up at the stars and thinking about home. The gardens on the east side of the palace had become Zyra's favorite place. For the past 2 weeks, she and Ryan had met there each afternoon. They walked along paths lined with flowers from a dozen different worlds, while Ryan told stories about Earth and his life there. Zyra learned that Ryan had grown up poor by Earth standards. His family had been among the first colonists on New Manitoba, which meant they had very little except hope and determination. Ryan had worked since he was young, helping maintain the colony's systems. When he turned 18, he joined Earth's military to help support his younger siblings. "Do you miss them?" Zyra asked one afternoon as they walked past a fountain. "Every day," Ryan said. "My sister Claire is in university now, studying medicine. My brother Danny is still on New Manitoba, working as an engineer. I have not seen them in 2 years. 2 years is not very long," Zyra said. "Valorians lived for over 200 years. 2 years felt like nothing. For humans it is," Ryan said. "We do not live as long as your people. 2 years feels like a lot when you might only have 60 or 70 years total." Zyra had known this intellectually, but hearing Ryan say it made it real. His entire life would be shorter than some Valorian childhoods. The thought made her sad in a way she did not fully understand. They walked in silence for a while. Then Zyra noticed Ryan wave at someone near the rose garden. An elderly Valorian man with skin faded to pale gray waved back. "Who is that?" Zyra asked. "Kale," Ryan said. "He tends the gardens. We talk sometimes." Zyra stopped walking. "You talk with a servant? Is that a problem?" "It is unusual," Zyra said carefully. "Royalty do not typically interact with the servant class." Ryan looked at her with an expression she had learned to recognize. It was the same look he gave Valorian nobles when they said something he disagreed with, but was too polite to argue about. "KL is interesting," Ryan said. "He served in the Valorian military for 80 years. He has stories about worlds I have never heard of. Plus, he treats me like a person instead of a political symbol." "I treat you like a person," Zyra protested. "You are getting better at it," Ryan said with a small smile. "But at our wedding, you looked at me like I was some kind of animal." Zyra felt her skin flush red with embarrassment. "I apologize." "The legends said." "I know what the legends said," Ryan interrupted gently. "It is all right. You are learning that the legends were wrong. That is what matters." They continued walking. Zyra thought about what Ryan had said. She was learning. Every day she discovered something new that contradicted the old stories. Humans were not mindless savages. They were people with families and dreams and feelings, just like Valorians. But if the legends were wrong about that, what else were they wrong about? The question bothered Zyra more than she wanted to admit. A week later, a major diplomatic event disrupted the comfortable routine Zyra and Ryan had established. The ambassador from the Crethon Confederacy arrived for a state visit. The Crethons were a powerful species, reptilian in appearance, with a strict hierarchical society. The Empress insisted on a formal dinner to honor the ambassador. Zyra dressed in her finest ceremonial robes. Ryan wore his dress uniform. They took their places at the long banquet table in the palace's grand dining hall. The Crethon ambassador was named Vrek. He was large even by Crethon standards, with dark green scales and cold yellow eyes. He sat near the Empress at the head of the table. Next to him sat a small Crethon child, perhaps the equivalent of 8 or 9 years old by human standards. The child looked frightened. Zyra noticed bruises on her arms that were visible despite her scales. Dinner progressed through multiple courses. Diplomats made small talk about trade agreements and mutual interests. The Empress and Ambassador Vrek discussed matters of galactic importance. Everyone ignored the child, who sat silently and barely touched her food. Then, during the fourth course, the child accidentally knocked over a glass of water. It spilled across the table, narrowly missing Ambassador Vrek's plate. The ambassador's reaction was immediate and violent. He struck the child across the face with the back of his hand. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent hall. "Clumsy spawn," Vrek snarled. "You embarrass me in front of the Empress." The child whimpered but did not cry. She pressed a napkin to her bleeding lip. The Valorian guests looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Zyra felt sick, but knew that intervening in another species' family matters violated diplomatic protocol. Different cultures had different customs. The Crethons believed in harsh discipline. It was not her place to judge. Ryan stood up. The scrape of his chair on the floor drew every eye in the room. He walked around the table with slow, deliberate steps. When he reached Ambassador Vrek, he stopped and looked down at the larger alien. "Ambassador Vrek," Ryan said. His voice was quiet but somehow carried through the entire hall. "I need you to understand something very clearly. What you just did is unacceptable." Vrek's scales flushed darker with anger. "How dare you address me in such a manner, human? This is my child. I will discipline her as I see fit." "No," Ryan said simply. "You will not." The Empress stood. "Lieutenant Parker, please return to your seat. This is not your concern." Ryan did not look at the Empress. His eyes stayed locked on Vrek. "Your Majesty. With respect, this is absolutely my concern. Harming children is always my concern. Different species have different customs," the Empress said firmly. "We do not interfere in such matters." "Then perhaps that is something that needs to change," Ryan said. He finally looked away from Vrek and addressed the entire table. "On Earth, we have very few absolute rules. Different cultures do things differently. We understand that. But there is one thing that every human culture agrees on, from the richest nations to the poorest colonies. You do not harm children, ever. Your human morality does not apply here," Vrek said. Ryan looked back at the ambassador. "You are right. Earth's laws do not apply on Valoria, but you should know that if you ever raise your hand to that child again while I am present, I will personally ensure there are consequences. I do not care about diplomatic protocols or cultural differences. Some things are wrong no matter what species you are." The silence in the room was absolute. Zyra could not believe what she was hearing. Ryan had just threatened a foreign ambassador in front of the Empress and dozens of witnesses. This could cause a major diplomatic incident. Vrek stood slowly. He was taller than Ryan by nearly 2 feet. "You threaten me, human?" "I am making you a promise," Ryan said calmly. "The child is under my protection now. If she is harmed again, we will have a conversation you will not enjoy. This is outrageous." Vrek turned to the Empress. "Your Majesty, I demand this human be punished for his insolence." The Empress looked torn. Zyra could see her mother's skin shifting through colors as she calculated the political ramifications. Finally, she spoke. "Ambassador Vrek, perhaps we should retire for the evening. I believe the dinner has become strained." It was a diplomatic non-answer, but it effectively ended the confrontation. Vrek glared at Ryan one more time, then gathered his child and left the hall. The other guests dispersed quickly, murmuring among themselves. The Empress waited until everyone else had left. Then she turned to Ryan with anger clear on her face. "That was unacceptable, Lieutenant Parker. You have potentially damaged our relationship with the Crethon Confederacy." "I understand, Your Majesty," Ryan said. "But I would make the same choice again." "You put politics above a child's safety?" Ryan asked. "Is that the Valorian way?" The Empress's skin flashed bright red. "You will not question me, human." "Mother," Zyra spoke up. She was surprised by her own voice. "May I speak with my husband privately?" The Empress looked at her daughter with an unreadable expression. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. But this conversation is not over." She left the hall. Zyra and Ryan stood alone among the half-finished dinner plates and spilled water. "Why did you do that?" Zyra asked. "Because it was right," Ryan said. "You endangered the alliance over one child." "Yes, that was foolish." "Maybe," Ryan said. "But humans believe some things are more important than politics. Protecting children is one of them." Zyra thought about the legends. They said humans were violent and could not control their emotions. They said humans only understood dominance and submission. But what Ryan had done was not about dominance. It was about protection, about standing up for someone who could not protect herself. "The legends said you were savage," Zyra said slowly. "But this was not savage. This was something else. Humans can be savage," Ryan admitted. "We can be violent when necessary. But that violence usually comes out when we are protecting someone. We are dangerous when the people we care about are threatened. You do not even know that child. I do not need to know her, Ryan said. She is a child. That is enough. Zyra looked at her husband and realized the legends had missed something crucial about humanity. They described human violence but not the reasons behind it. They talked about humans being dangerous but not about what made them dangerous. Humans were not randomly violent. They were protective, and when that protective instinct was triggered, they would ignore any rule, defy any authority, and face any danger to defend those who could not defend themselves. The next morning, Ambassador Vrek requested a private meeting with Ryan. Zyra insisted on attending. They met in a small conference room. Vrek looked different than he had at dinner. Smaller somehow. His scales were a duller color. Lieutenant Parker, Vrek said quietly. I came to apologize. Ryan looked surprised. Apologize? Yes. What I did to my daughter was wrong. You were right to confront me. Vrek's voice was strained. On my world, harsh discipline is traditional, but tradition does not make something right. I see that now. What changed your mind? Ryan asked. My daughter asked me why the human cared about her when her own father did not, Vrek said. I had no answer for that question. He paused. If you were serious about your protection, I would like to request that she be allowed to stay here on Valoria for a time. To attend school. To be away from me until I learn to be a better parent. Ryan nodded. I think that can be arranged. After Vrek left, Zyra sat in silence with Ryan. The legends said humans could not understand complex social structures, she said finally. They said you only knew dominance and submission. But what you did last night was neither. You showed compassion to someone you had never met. After, Ryan smiled. Zyra, can I tell you something? The legends about humans were written by people who did not understand us. They saw our strength and our violence, but they did not see our hearts. Zyra's skin shifted to soft green, the color of learning and growth. Then, I want to understand your hearts, she said. Tell me more about humans. The real truth, not the legends. And Ryan did. 3 months into the marriage, Zyra no longer thought of Ryan as a stranger. He was her friend. Perhaps more than that, though she was not ready to examine those feelings too closely. They spent hours together each day, talking about everything from philosophy to engineering to the best foods from their respective worlds. Zyra had stopped believing the legends. Every day showed her something new that contradicted what she had been taught. Humans were not primitive. They were adaptive. They were not emotionally unstable. They felt deeply but controlled those feelings. They were not unable to understand complex ideas. They simply approached problems differently than other species. Then came the day that would test everything Zyra had learned. She was in a council meeting when her mother's chief advisor burst into the room. His skin was pure white with terror. Empress, we have a crisis. The colony world of Velcor 7 has been attacked. The Empress stood immediately. Attacked? By whom? A terrorist group calling themselves the Liberation Front. They are Jaroth separatists. They have taken control of the main settlement and are holding civilians hostage. Zyra felt her blood go cold. How many hostages? 200 confirmed, including Princess Mara. Mara, Zyra's younger sister, only 70 years old, was on Velcor 7 for a cultural exchange program. The council room erupted into chaos. Everyone shouted at once, demanding action and throwing out ideas. The Empress called for silence. How many terrorists? She asked. Approximately 40 Jaroth fighters. They have fortified the main administration building. They are demanding independence for the Jaroth territories and the withdrawal of all Valorian military forces from their worlds. The Empress looked to her military commander, General Thoros. What are our options? Thoros pulled up a holographic display of the settlement. We have a destroyer in orbit. I recommend an orbital strike on the administration building. It would eliminate the terrorist threat. And the hostages? Zyra demanded. Thoros's skin flickered with regret. There would be casualties. Significant casualties. But we would eliminate a terrorist cell. and send a message that such attacks will not be tolerated. You are talking about killing 200 innocent people, including my daughter, the Empress said. I am talking about making a hard decision, Thoros replied. If we negotiate or attempt a rescue, we show weakness. More attacks will follow. But if we respond with overwhelming force, other groups will think twice before targeting Valorian citizens. Zyra could not believe what she was hearing. There must be another way. There is not, Thoros said firmly. I have reviewed the intelligence. The building is too well defended for a ground assault. An orbital strike is the only viable option. The Empress looked at the holographic display for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. Prepare the strike. I want it executed within the hour. No, Zyra said. Everyone turned to look at her. Mother, please. There has to be another option. I have made my decision, the Empress said. It is the only logical choice. Zyra ran from the council room. She did not know where she was going until she found herself at the diplomatic wing. At Ryan's door, she knocked frantically. Ryan opened the door, took one look at her face, and pulled her inside. What happened? He asked. Zyra explained everything through tears. The attack, the hostages, Mara, the orbital strike that would kill everyone. Ryan listened carefully. When she finished, he asked, Can I see the intelligence data? What? The information about the terrorist position. Building layout, guard positions, everything your military has. Why? Because maybe there is another option, Ryan said. Zyra used her royal access codes to pull up the intelligence files. Ryan studied them for 20 minutes, asking questions and making notes on a datapad. Finally, he looked up. I can get them out, he said. What? The hostages. I can extract them. It would be risky, but it is possible. Zyra stared at him. The Valorian military says it is impossible. They say a frontal assault is impossible. Ryan corrected. They are probably right about that. But there are other ways to approach the problem. Tell me. Ryan pulled up the building schematic. The terrorists have fortified the main entrance and the obvious access points. But they are assuming a traditional military response. They expect your people to follow standard doctrine. And you would not follow standard doctrine? Human tactics are different, Ryan said. We specialize in unconventional warfare. Deception, misdirection, hitting where the enemy does not expect. He pointed to several locations on the schematic. The building has service tunnels for maintenance. The terrorists have blocked them. But the blocks are designed to stop large forces. A small team could bypass them. We go in through the tunnels, extract the hostages in small groups, while creating distractions to keep the terrorists focused elsewhere, and evacuate before they realize what is happening. That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, Ryan agreed. But it gives the hostages a chance. An orbital strike gives them none. Zyra wanted to believe him. But doubt gnawed at her. Why would you risk yourself for Mara? You have never even met her. Ryan looked at her with an expression she could not read. Because she is your sister. Because she is innocent. Because those 200 people deserve a chance to live. He paused. And because humans do not give up on people just because saving them is difficult. Zyra made a decision. Come with me. She brought Ryan to the command center where her mother and the military leaders were finalizing the strike plan. When Zyra entered with Ryan, the Empress frowned. Zyra, you should not be here, and Lieutenant Parker has no security clearance for this facility. Mother, he has a plan to rescue the hostages. General Thoros actually laughed. A human has a plan? Princess, no offense to your husband, but this is a military operation. It requires expertise that— Show them, Zyra interrupted. Ryan approached the holographic display. He explained his plan in simple terms, pointing out weaknesses in the terrorist defenses and showing how a small team could exploit them. The military officers listened with increasingly skeptical expressions. When Ryan finished, Thoros shook his head. This plan relies on too many assumptions. What if the terrorists have sensors in the tunnels? What if they have more guards than we think? What if the hostages panic and give away the rescue? Those are all valid concerns, Ryan said. But they are manageable risks. An orbital strike has zero chance of hostage survival. My plan has maybe a 60% chance. Maybe less. But it is better than nothing. 60%, Thoros repeated. You would risk a military operation on 60% odds? I have completed missions with worse odds, Ryan said. Sometimes you do not get perfect solutions. You do what you can with what you have. The Empress studied Ryan for a long moment. If this fails, you could trigger a larger conflict. The Zharoth could use failed rescue as propaganda. If it fails, I will take full responsibility, Ryan said. But I believe it will work. Silence filled the command center. Zyra held her breath. Finally, the Empress spoke. I am authorizing this mission. But Lieutenant Parker, you will have one attempt. If the situation becomes too dangerous, you will abort, and we will proceed with the orbital strike. Understood, Your Majesty. Within 30 minutes, Ryan had assembled a team. 3 humans from Earth's embassy volunteered immediately. To everyone's surprise, 6 Valorian soldiers also stepped forward. We have served with the human before, one of them said, gesturing at Ryan. He saved our lives during the power grid incident. If he says this can work, we believe him. The mission launched 2 hours later. Zyra watched from the command center as the team infiltrated the building through the service tunnels. Helmet cameras transmitted everything back to Valoria. Ryan's plan worked exactly as he described. The team moved silently through the tunnels, bypassing the terrorists' defensive positions. When they reached the hostage-holding areas, they used distraction charges to draw guards away while extracting small groups of civilians. It was not perfect. They encountered more resistance than expected. 2 of the Valorian soldiers were injured. Ryan himself took a plasma burn to his left arm while covering the extraction of a group of children, but they persisted. One group of hostages at a time, Ryan's team moved them through the tunnels to safety. When the terrorists finally realized what was happening, most of the hostages were already out. Ryan's team engaged the remaining fighters in a brief firefight. Not a single terrorist was killed. Ryan used non-lethal weapons, stunning them instead. The final extraction included Princess Mara. Zyra watched on the screen as Ryan found her sister huddled in a corner of the administration building, terrified but unharmed. He spoke to her gently, calmed her down, and personally carried her to safety when she was too scared to walk. 6 hours after the mission began, all 200 hostages were safe. 0 civilian casualties, 0 terrorist casualties. 15 terrorists captured alive. The command center erupted in cheers. General Thoros looked stunned. The Empress actually smiled. When Ryan returned to the palace, he was exhausted and injured but alive. Zyra met him at the landing pad where his transport ship arrived. Without thinking, she ran to him and embraced him. You did it, she said. You saved them all. Ryan winced from his injuries but returned the embrace. I had help. It was a team effort. The legends said humans only understand violence and destruction, Zyra said. But you could have killed those terrorists. You chose not to. Killing is easy, Ryan said. Saving people is hard. Humans prefer hard. Later that evening, after medical teams had treated Ryan's injuries, Zyra sat with him in the palace gardens. Mara had insisted on thanking him personally, hugging him so tightly that Ryan's ribs hurt. I do not understand, Zyra said. You risked your life for people you do not know. For my sister, who you had never met. Why? Ryan looked at the stars overhead. On Earth, we have a saying. We are all in this together. Life is hard enough without making it harder for each other. When someone needs help, you help them. It is that simple. It is not simple, Zyra said. It is extraordinary. No, Ryan said gently. It is human. Zyra realized in that moment that the legends had gotten everything wrong about humanity. They were not savage or primitive or violent without reason. They were people who had learned hard lessons on a difficult world. They were people who valued life so much that they would risk their own to save others. They were people who chose mercy when vengeance would be easier. They were people who saw problems everyone else called impossible and found solutions anyway. And Zyra had married one of them. The days following the Velcor 7 rescue changed everything. Ryan became a celebrity across the Valorian Empire. News broadcasts showed footage of him carrying Princess Mara to safety. Diplomatic channels buzzed with commentary about the human who had defied all expectations. Even the Jaroth terrorists, interviewed from their prison cells, spoke of Ryan with something close to respect. But none of that mattered to Zyra as much as what happened 3 days after the rescue. She found Ryan in the palace gardens, sitting on a bench near the fountain. His left arm was still bandaged from the plasma burn, though he had refused to stay in the medical wing for more than a day. "I have been looking for you," Zyra said. Ryan looked up and smiled. "I needed some quiet. The attention has been overwhelming." Zyra sat beside him. "My mother wants to give you a medal. The Order of the Crystal Star. It is the highest honor the Empire can bestow." "I do not need a medal," Ryan said. "I just did what needed to be done." "That is exactly what makes you worthy of it," Zyra said. She was quiet for a moment. "Ryan, I need to tell you something." "All right, I was wrong about you. About humans. About everything." The words came faster now. Like a dam breaking. "The legends taught me that your people were primitive and violent. I believed those legends my entire life. When we married, I thought I was doing my duty by accepting a barbarian as my husband." Ryan said nothing, just listened. "But you are not a barbarian," Zyra continued. "You are one of the most civilized people I have ever met. You fixed our power grid when our engineers could not. You protected a child from abuse when everyone else looked away. You saved 200 people, including my sister, when our military said it was impossible. And through it all, you have been patient with me. Even when I treated you with disdain, you never responded with anger." "Zyra, please, let me finish," she said. "I need to understand something. Why? Why did you agree to this marriage? You could have refused. You could have let Earth send a different representative. Why did you come here knowing that the Valorians looked down on humans?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Because I believed things could change. Earth has been isolated for so long. Your people and others kept us at arm's length because of fear and old prejudices. This marriage was a chance to show the galaxy who humans really are. Not through declarations or propaganda, but through actions. You wanted to prove the legends wrong." "I wanted to show the truth," Ryan corrected. "The legends are not entirely wrong. Humans can be violent. We do come from a harsh world. We are dangerous when threatened. But those legends only tell part of the story. They do not talk about our capacity for compassion, or creativity, or hope." Zyra felt her skin shift to deep blue. The color of profound emotion. "You sacrificed your comfort and your dignity to change minds, including mine." "I did not see it as a sacrifice," Ryan said. "I saw it as an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" Ryan looked at her directly. "To make a friend. Maybe more than a friend, if we were lucky." Zyra's skin flushed bright gold. She had learned enough about her own people's emotions to know what that meant. Joy, affection, possibly love. "I think we have been lucky," she said softly. Before either of them could say more, a palace guard approached. "Princess Zyra, Lieutenant Parker. The Empress requests your presence in the throne room immediately." They followed the guard through the palace corridors. Zyra noticed that servants and courtiers alike now looked at Ryan with respect instead of condescension. Some even bowed as he passed. In the throne room, the Empress waited with her full council. But she was not alone. On the view screen that dominated the far wall were representatives from a dozen different species. Zyra recognized ambassadors from the Crethon Confederacy, the Jaroth government, the Terran Alliance, and others. "Mother, what is this?" Zyra asked. The Empress gestured to the screen. "A meeting that was requested because of your husband's actions." One of the Jaroth representatives spoke, His image on the screen showed him as an older male with pale blue skin and elaborate markings. Lieutenant Parker. I am First Speaker Vorath, of the Zeroth Assembly. I wanted to speak with you directly about the events on Velcor 7. Ryan stepped forward. First Speaker. You captured 15 of our citizens, Vorath said. Terrorists who have committed violence against Valorian colonies. Under normal circumstances, I would be demanding their immediate release and condemning Valorian aggression. Valorian aggression. But these are not normal circumstances, Vorath continued. My people have watched the footage of your rescue operation. You could have killed our citizens. Any other military force would have. Instead, you captured them alive and unharmed. You even provided them with medical care for injuries they sustained before your arrival. Ryan nodded. They are prisoners, not targets for revenge. This is unusual thinking, Vorath said. It made me curious about humanity. So I researched your people. I learned about Earth's history. About your wars and your struggles. About how you nearly destroyed yourselves before learning to cooperate. That is all true, Ryan admitted. But you also learned something else, Vorath said. You learned that enemies can become allies. That violence creates cycles that must eventually be broken. That showing mercy is not weakness, but strength. Vorath paused. The Zeroth have been fighting for independence through terrorism because we believed it was our only option. But watching you, Lieutenant Parker, I see another path. One where we negotiate instead of destroy. Where we find compromise instead of demanding total victory. Are you saying you want to negotiate? The Empress asked, surprise clear in her voice. I am saying that if a human can show mercy to my people when he had every reason to destroy them, then perhaps there is hope for a peaceful solution to our conflict, Vorath said. I am requesting formal negotiations with the Valorian Empire to discuss Zeroth autonomy, and I am requesting that Lieutenant Parker be present as a neutral observer. The throne room was silent with shock. The Zeroth and Valorians had been in conflict for decades. Terrorism had killed thousands, yet here was a chance for peace, created by one human's decision to choose mercy over vengeance. The Empress looked at Ryan. Lieutenant Parker, would you be willing to serve in this capacity? I would be honored, Your Majesty, Ryan said. Over the next hour, representatives from multiple species spoke. The Crethon ambassador thanked Ryan for his intervention with Ambassador Vrek, revealing that the incident had sparked a larger conversation about child welfare in Crethon society. The Terran Alliance representative praised Ryan for representing humanity so well. Even species that Zyra had never heard of before expressed interest in establishing formal relations with Earth, all because of one man who refused to accept that problems were unsolvable. After the meeting ended and the screens went dark, the Empress approached Ryan personally. Lieutenant Parker, I owe you an apology, she said. I believed the ancient legends about humanity. I agreed to this marriage alliance as a political necessity, never imagining that a human could prove so valuable to our empire. Your Majesty, please, let me finish. The Empress said. You have shown me that the legends were written by people who feared what they did not understand. Humans are not primitive. You are simply different. You approach problems from directions we would never consider. You value things we often overlook. And in doing so, you find solutions that elude us. She turned to address the full council. I am officially recommending that the Valorian Senate revise all educational materials regarding humanity. The old legends will be retired. New materials will be created based on facts and direct observation. Furthermore, the Empress continued, I am recommending that Earth be invited to join the Valorian Alliance as a full partner species, not a junior member. Humans have earned that right. The council members, who weeks ago would have laughed at such a suggestion, now nodded in agreement. That evening, Zyra and Ryan returned to the gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that Earth and Valoria somehow shared, despite being light years apart. I have a question, Zyra said as they walked. Ask me anything. When we first married, you said you wanted to earn respect instead of accepting it as a gift. You have earned more respect than I think you ever imagined. But I wonder, Was that your goal? To prove humanity worthy of respect? Ryan thought about this. Honestly, no. My goal was simpler than that. What was it? To be kind, Ryan said. To help where I could. To protect those who needed protecting. To choose the right thing over the easy thing. The respect was never the point. It was just a consequence of trying to be decent. Zyra stopped walking and turned to face him. The legends called humans dangerous. They were right about that. But not in the way they meant. What do you mean? You are dangerous because you make us question everything we thought we knew, Zyra said. You are dangerous because you refuse to accept limitations that everyone else considers absolute. You are dangerous because you show mercy when logic says you should destroy. You are dangerous because you make the impossible seem possible. Unquote. She reached out and took his hand. Her crystalline skin was warm, gold, glowing softly in the fading light. The legends said humans were savage and violent and primitive, Zyra continued. But the truth is so much more complex. Humans are creative and compassionate and brave. You are survivors who learned kindness instead of cruelty. You are fighters who choose protection over conquest. You are dreamers who refuse to accept that some problems cannot be solved. Ryan smiled. That is a very generous description. It is accurate, Zyra said firmly. I have seen it. Not just in you, but in the other humans who volunteered for the rescue mission. In the messages I have received from Earth, congratulating us on the peace talks. In the history I have read about your species overcoming your own conflicts to reach the stars. She stepped closer to him. Ryan Parker, I want you to know something. This marriage began as a political arrangement. I accepted it out of duty, expecting to endure it as a burden. But somewhere along the way, it became real. You became real to me. Not as a symbol or a political tool, but as a person I have come to care about deeply. Ryan's expression softened. Zyra, let me finish, she said. I do not know what the future holds, but I know that I want you by my side. Not because our governments require it, but because I choose it, because you make me better, because you challenge me to think differently, because when I am with you, I see possibilities I never imagined before. Ryan pulled her close. The legends got so much wrong about humans. But there is one thing they got right. What is that? We do not give up on things we care about, Ryan said. When I came here, I hoped that maybe this marriage could become something real. That maybe you and I could find common ground. I hoped. But I did not know if it would work. And now? Now I know, Ryan said. It worked because you were willing to look past the legends and see the truth. It worked because you chose to learn instead of judge. It worked because you are brave enough to change your mind when the evidence demands it. Zyra felt tears forming, something she had not experienced in years. My mother is right. The legends need to be rewritten, not just about humanity, but about what is possible when different species truly try to understand each other. Will you help rewrite them? Ryan asked. We will rewrite them together, Zyra said. They stood in the garden as stars began to appear overhead. Somewhere among those stars was Earth, the death world that had produced a species the galaxy had feared and misunderstood. And somewhere among those stars was Valoria's future, changed forever by one human who had shown them that strength comes in many forms. The legends had said humans were dangerous. They were right. But humans were dangerous in the most beautiful way possible. They were dangerous because they believed in hope, because they saw problems as puzzles to solve rather than walls to accept, because they chose kindness even when cruelty would be easier. And most dangerous of all, they inspired others to be better than they thought they could be. As Zyra and Ryan stood together in the garden, surrounded by flowers from a dozen different worlds, Zyra realized that the greatest gift Ryan had given her was not the rescue of her sister, or the peace talks with the Jaroth, or the respect he had earned for humanity. The greatest gift was showing her that the galaxy was bigger and more wonderful than the legends had ever suggested. That people from different worlds could find common ground. That understanding was possible even when everything seemed stacked against it. and that sometimes, the best things in life came from taking a chance on someone the world told you to fear. The alien princess had been shocked by her husband. But in the end, that shock had transformed into something far more powerful. Love, understanding, hope for a future where humans and aliens worked together as true equals. The legends would be rewritten. And this time, they would tell the truth.